Hey everyone, Ben Leber here at TCO Studios for Vikings Entertainment Network. And the NFL season and the Vikings season never stops. And as we get into the 2020 NFL Combine, it's right upon us. And to talk all things Vikings, we bring in NFL Network expert Tom Pelissero. Tom, how you doing, man?
Fantastic, Ben. Just the calm before the storm here, and it's not all that calm, right?
No, it certainly is not. You know, the one thing I'll bring up, the Vikings season, it ended, and it ended abruptly, as most teams do. But their 2020 season started the next day with Kevin Stefanski leaving for the Cleveland Browns. A lot of changes immediately on the Monday following the loss. How would you sort of describe the end of the season and into the 2020 season kind of starting so abruptly?
Well, first of all, there were really kind of ebbs and flows in the season, right, Ben? At the end of September they're 2-2, coming off the bad loss in Chicago. We're talking about what's going on with Stephon Diggs, what's going on with the offense, comments that people are making. And all of a sudden they turn a corner. They play really good football through the middle of the season. Dalvin Cook gets hurt. You go through a little bit of dip at the end, play maybe your best game the entire year in New Orleans. And then midway through the third quarter, they're in it in San Francisco. As much as they had struggled offensively, just kind of ran out of gas playing on a short week. So, yes, there are some changes through the course of this offseason. Kevin Stefanski moving on is certainly one of them. But the fact that you have the continuity with Gary Kubiak systematically, they're not going to change the scheme. I think they found something that fits their key players. It fits Dalvin Cook. It fits Kirk Cousins. It fits in terms of what the wide receivers can bring to the table as a complementary piece to that running game. Defensively, yes, George Edwards moves on, but they promote two guys who are in-house. They make some other changes, in terms of the defensive backs coach and whatnot. But you still have a lot of continuity here. Some tough decisions heading into the offseason. But anytime you make it to the divisional round, you're one of the last 8 teams playing. I'm not going to say that's a successful season by the standards that Mike Zimmer and company would have, but certainly you feel like you're in position here. Now you got to figure out in terms of where you are at in the salary cap, where you're at with the age of your roster, where your resources need to be devoted. Those are all the things that they're putting together here in the next few weeks before free agency opens in earnest with the negotiating window on March 16th.
And one of the guys that you alluded to was Dom Capers. He was brought in as a defensive consultant. He was the same defensive consultant for the Jacksonville Jaguars last season. Here's Mike Zimmer. He has this guy in Gary Kubiak, who he relied on from last year. Now he's the offensive coordinator. Then he brings in a very seasoned veteran, Dom Capers. What does Dom bring to this team and to this defense?
I think what's really interesting with the hiring of Dom Capers, who I covered in Green Bay when he arrived there as the defensive coordinator, already at that point, very experienced, decades that he had already been in the NFL. It's a different viewpoint and a different background from what Mike Zimmer has been in the past. One thing that Zimmer has always done, whether it's with his son, Adam Zimmer, who's told me before about stories being back at the ranch at Kentucky, and Zimmer will be pulling up something on his iPhone, and they'll be taking notes, and, just ideas kind of flowing. Zimmer wants to just think about, what more can we do? How can we combat things? We were getting attacked by offenses this way last season. Well, what can we do on the other side of it? Well, Dom Capers comes up through the Pittsburgh system, working with all the fire zone blitzes and things that they do there. That's really what he brought once upon a time to Green Bay when he went there, replacing Bob Sanders as the defensive coordinator in 2009. And Vikings fans will certainly remember plenty of battles with that Green Bay defense, what they looked like, the way they moved around some parts. Zimmer's defense, completely different, a guy who came up under Bill Parcells. You're talking about two different types of philosophies here, but it's just an extra set of eyes, somebody who's been around the block. He's been a head coach before and had some success within the league. Dom Capers has, but also just a different, philosophy on defense, some different background, having that extra voice in the room, somebody who brings a little bit of gravity there and could just maybe bring some ideas to the table that could be incorporated into what, historically, certainly with Mike Zimmer throughout his tenure, has been a very successful defensive scheme.
Well, the one thing that I really like, too, when you look at Dom Capers and what he did is specifically at Green Bay, 7 of the 9 years that he was there, they were top 10 in the NFL in interceptions. And I know outside from this year, this is a defense that I personally don't think they get enough hands on the football, specifically in the secondary. So maybe there's just something there. Maybe it's a different voice. Maybe it's a few things that they can key on to get a few more interceptions in that regard as well. So obviously a great defensive mind. And I know there's other people that say, hey, he's a 3-4 guy. But let's be honest. When it gets to sub packages and third downs, it's all just basically a 3-4 defense, and you have to be flexible. The one thing that as we transition from the coaching staff and the coaching changes is the one thing that keeps popping up as we get into the combine and after the combine is free agency. What are the Vikings going to do, and what's the remedy and what's the formula when they're $12 million under the cap?
Well, that's all part of what they're working through. As we record this, they're in their free agency meetings. They already went through draft meetings. They'll go down to the combine, meet with the agents for their players, kind of get a feel for what might be able to be done, whether it might be restructures, extensions, and things like that. And then really they'll regroup once they get back from Indianapolis, go through the master plan. Now, that's not to say that Rick Spielman, George Paton, Rob Brzezinski, they don't already have a plan. That's what Brzezinski does year round in terms of keeping the cap healthy. It's always what Spielman and Paton are thinking about in terms of the long-term roster building. But you don't just have one plan in the NFL, because especially if you're counting on things to happen in free agency or the draft, there's different scenarios. Things can fall differently the way you were expecting. The prices at certain positions could end up being outrageous relative to where you had them projected. Now, you don't have to, be an expert on this to know and look at the cap right now and say where some of those decisions are going to have to be made. They're going to have to figure out, is Xavier Rhodes at his number part of the plan going forward? What happens with Linval Joseph going forward? Everson Griffin has voided his contract. Is he potentially part of the plan? And you also, Trey Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander, a couple others of your top cornerbacks. They're free agents. Is there any chance you can bring those guys back? They're going to have to figure out a lot of solutions on that side of the ball. Offensively, there's going to be some pressing matters. Dalvin Cook and a potential contract extension is one that you would expect is going to be certainly a part of the conversation here in the months to come. Kirk Cousins in a very unique position entering the last year of his deal. He's not the first quarterback to be in a contract year, but he might be the first quarterback ever to go into a contract year, due almost $30 million fully guaranteed in that contract year. So those are going to be some interesting discussions that take place. There's a lot of moving parts right now. They historically have drafted well under Spielman. If you look at the course of not just first-round picks, but what they've done later in the draft, they've done a lot of positive things. You would think that offensive line, always going to be a spot that they need to figure out some solutions. And just based on where they're at, the entire defense, all three levels, they're going to have to make some interesting choices there.
When it comes to Dalvin Cook, what is your sense? Have you talked to anybody just about where he's feeling? Let's just say the Vikings want to go through this season before they offer a big extension. Is he the type of guy that's going to play along? Is he the type of guy that's going to hold out? Is he going to be dramatic? Is he just going to do what he's supposed to do on the field and then let everything play out and let his agent handle it? How do you feel this whole situation going down with Dalvin Cook?
Well, Dalvin Cook has approached everything professionally through the course of his career here. You look at some of the things he's done in the community with the Vikings food truck. He's really ingratiated himself and integrated himself into the entire Vikings culture. And when he has been healthy, he's one of the most dynamic players in the league. I mean, you look at the numbers that he was putting up prior to getting nicked up at the end of the season, kind of that weird injury, and then multiple injuries that he was dealing with. There were some things there, but when he was on his game, he was one of the best and most productive running backs, if not players, in the entire NFL. Having said all that, he's in an interesting position because he was a second-round draft pick. There is no fifth-year option on his contract. So you're talking about a guy who's going into a contract year here right now. He has a level of leverage simply because if he were not there, you saw it down the stretch last season. The Vikings are not quite the same offense. It'll be fascinating to see. Again, they got months and months to work on this. I do believe that there is a discussion to be had. A little early to project, but it's hard to imagine we go into a scenario where Dalvin Cook happily reports to training camp day one, absent a contract extension. Now, what exactly does that look like? Is there a protracted holdout that would subject him to fines and everything else? We'll have to see. But there absolutely are conversations that are going to be had on that front with a guy who, again, when he's been healthy, he's probably been the Vikings' best player on offense.
We've talked about a lot of players, whether it be free agent guys coming up, guys that are on one-year deals that have left over to sign with Dalvin and Kirk. You alluded to the fact that Mike Zimmer, he's got 1 year left on his contract. Rick Spielman, who's drafted outstandingly well for this organization, has 1 year left on his contract. Where do you see the Vikings sort of attacking their contracts and what that looks like to potential free agents coming here this offseason?
It's an interesting situation, certainly on both fronts. You would think that Mike Zimmer's contract, even if you're looking at a potential 1 year extension, which is not uncommon for coaches who are in a contract year, would be a possibility. Mike Zimmer loves it in Minnesota. He's also made clear publicly he doesn't really have a problem coaching out his contract because he believes that if he were to become a free agent, he'd be probably a pretty popular guy there too. He's spent time building this. I mean, this is going to be year 7, I believe, for Mike Zimmer in Minnesota. It's taken time for him to get all those veterans who really know his defensive scheme in and out. You saw flashes of what the offense can be a year ago. Starting over, there's always, you can talk about grass is greener. There's always going to be some value in that, but there's also value in continuity and wanting to stay put. And the Wolves have shown that level of patience and understanding. They think they've got a really good coach. You got to ask yourself, who's better that's out there? With regard to Rick Spielman, he's somebody who certainly has been involved at every level of the Vikings organization, not just personnel, but in terms of the stadium and the facility, all the different places where he's made an impact. Rick Spielman, based on everything that I know, is not going to be going anywhere.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. Now, as we talk about the 2020 NFL Combine in Indianapolis, it's all about the best players in college football. Obviously, the Vikings, like every other team in the league, have some holes to fill. They want to make some tweaks when it comes to personnel. The one thing that the fans, at least, have always talked about is offensive line. That's an area where I think this last year they could have used some help on the inside part of their offensive line. But as you start looking at potentially the biggest needs for this team is at cornerback in the secondary. Mackenzie Alexander, even at the nickel position, is a free agent. There are some places where you could add some nice young talent in the first round. Where do you see the Vikings going with pick number 25?
Well, corner is always a position that the Vikings are looking at. They've drafted there multiple times, high up in the draft. Xavier Rhodes, of course, was an example. Mike Hughes more recently. Mackenzie Alexander was a second-round pick. You need those guys. You can't have enough of them. We've seen that because, as you alluded to earlier, the amount of sub-package defense, there's plenty of times where you got 3 or 4 corners on the field. The Vikings were in a position in the playoffs where they had to have Andrew Sendejo play in the slot because they had injuries to both Hughes and Alexander. You need to continue to inject talent in that group. Depending, again, what happens to Waynes, you would think that there's going to be a strong market out there for Alexander. Maybe that's an expendable piece from the Vikings' perspective if they believe that Mike Hughes is going to be fully healthy, simply because, some similar types of traits that those guys have. I still go back to the defensive line, which has been one of the deep groups over time. But let's say Linval Joseph and Everson Griffin aren't back. You're still going to want to continue to inject more talent into that group. And then, yes, the offensive line. Now, I don't think that they left the cupboard bare a year ago. They signed Josh Klein after he got released, started him at guard the entire season. They drafted Garrett Bradbury in the first round, which was, a perfect example of how you never exactly know how the board is going to fall with that run that they saw on first-round lineman. Chris Lindstrom going to Atlanta earlier than people thought that he would. But, a long-term plan at the left tackle position, you would think, is something that has to be on the Vikings' radar. Riley Reif has held down that position for the past couple of years, brought some stability, but a guy who's getting toward the tail end of his career. Those guys do not grow on trees, as you know, Ben. It's tough to find guys who've got 34-inch arms and they can move the way you want them to in a zone running scheme, weighing 300-plus pounds. Brian O'Neill seems like he's going to be an answer for them at the right tackle position, but getting that blind side taken care of, you would think, has to be a priority in terms of the long haul here.
Well, last question for you, Tom, and we'll kind of go back to the offensive line you're talking about. Is it potentially an option to move Riley Reif around to the left guard position? You swap Brian O'Neill to the left tackle position, and now all you're looking for is a right tackle position, either free agency or the draft, and then all of a sudden, when you maybe think you've got multiple pieces, you're just really looking at one piece on the offensive line that kind of shore up all the issues.
Well, the Vikings have done some of those things in the past in terms of moving people around, playing. Mike Remmers was a guy who they moved inside and outside from tackle to guard. They like those versatile skill sets. I don't know for a fact that Brian O'Neill is plan A at left tackle. Again, you have a little bit different in terms of the skill set. Generally speaking, the right tackles aren't going to have as good a feet, but O'Neill is a really good athlete. He's shown that. He's put on some weight since he arrived as well. Absolutely, you have to take that into consideration because, look at the money that offensive tackles, offensive linemen have been getting for years in free agency. Resetting the market. Arizona just re-signed DJ Humphries for $15 million a year. Now, he was a first-round draft pick. They had to pay up to keep him, but that just goes to show, Nate Solder was a guy who cashed in big time in free agency. Trent Brown last year got like $16 million a year from the Raiders. And the Vikings know it. I mean, they had to pay Riley Reif. They've had to pay Mike Remmers. They've had to pay guys in free agency. If you can get those guys through the draft, that is one way to keep your salary cap healthy. There are some strong positions in this draft. Wide receiver is definitely one. Cornerback seems like it's one, at least at the top of the draft. A lot of different possibilities for the Vikings. And, free agency, though, comes first. Cuts come first. Renegotiations come first. All those puzzle pieces are going to fit together. And you can rest assured that by the time March 18th rolls around, Rick Spielman will have plenty of different scenarios and plans.
Oh, the football season never stops. We got the 2020 season already upon us. NFL Combine, Tom Pelissero, thank you so much for all your insight. Hope to see you down there in Indianapolis.
Absolutely, buddy.